Woodworks. Today is another episode of my 52 cards in 52 weeks challenge. Last week I drew this 6 of spades, which says jointer in feed lock handle. So that is what we're going to be making today. So I bought this Powermatic jointer a little over a year ago and I absolutely love it, but the day that I got it, I accidentally broke the handle. I knocked it on something when we were moving it in, and I really don't like the fact that it's plastic. I love everything about this jointer, but I don't like the plastic handles, and I recently got a matching planer which has 2 of these plastic handles, so I figured I would make some out of aluminum that would just be a lot more durable, and I think they would just have a nicer fit and finish. So I'll start with taking this big chunk of aluminum, taking it over to the bandsaw, and cutting out a couple of rounds. All 3 of these handles are pretty much going to be the same. The 2 for the planer are about 2 inches long, and the 1 for the jointer is about 4 inches long. But other than that, they're completely the same. With those couple pieces cut out, I'll head over to the lathe and chuck them up. I'm starting with just the top discs. That's going to be the main part of the handle. And starting with the center drill, I can get a little spot in the center that I can then just face to. You don't need to do this to do a facing operation, but I find it's easier to have a stop point in the middle. And I'm just facing each side and taking it out of the chuck and using the auto feed on my lathe to just make a nice smooth finish, running everything pretty slow here, and then I can feed a piece of bar stock through the headstock of the lathe. And start doing the same thing, facing that off so I have a nice flat and square face. With that done, I can move the piece out about 10 inches and then just run a path along the entire piece. That way I just have a nice smooth finish across the entire piece, and I'll move that back where I can start to drill for a tap. This is a metric tap. I don't remember exactly what the size was. I think it was an M10 or an M12. And then I used a automatic spring center. I built this a couple years ago, actually quite a few years ago now that I think about it. And you just mount that in your tailstock, and it just keeps constant pressure against the tap. As you're tapping something in, you can see that that spring center just slowly pushes out, and it's a really handy little tool to have. It's basically just a pin with a spring behind it. It's a quick and easy project. It was one of the first things I ever made when I started machining. Then I can start cutting these pieces off, and I tapped each one of these pieces. I did the same thing. I would just move it out a couple inches, tap a hole, and then go over to the saw and cut it off, and then I would start that same process again. So I had to do that for each handle. So 3 times, nothing too hard here. With all 3 of those little pieces tapped, I needed a way to mount them to the handle piece itself. Now, I was going to weld these originally, but my welding tank was empty, so I decided I would just thread these on as well. So I tapped a smaller bolt in the back. I just did a 1/4 20. And then just sent the tap through. And with those tapped, I wanted to cut a recess in the handle piece itself that would just sit in. Also, the bolts I had were only 1 inch long, and those handle pieces are right around 1 inch, so I needed to go in about 1/2 inch so that I would have enough thread engagement that these would stay on there nice and tight. With that drilled most of the way out, I can go in with a boring tool and bore that to my correct size. Oh yeah. And then I just tap that piece in with the hammer, flip it over, and put some Loctite on because I really don't want these to come off or loosen up at any point. And then I can mount it back in the lathe chuck to hold it, and I lock the chuck, and then I can use the lathe chuck itself to tighten that bolt. Like I said, I want it nice and snug. I don't want it to come loose. And then I just took a light pass over the top of that cylinder to get a nice clean face, and then I used a knurling tool to put a knurl on there to get some nice grip. Unfortunately, this first one didn't come out very well. Well, that's a mess. You should have slowed it down. I slowed the speed down on my lathe. You really want to run knurling tools really slow, and I just kind of went for it. And once I slowed the speed down, I got a much nicer result. I was much happier with that. That's a little better. So I did that to all 3 handles. Then I just took this little angle tool and mounted that in, and I just kissed the edge on both sides to just put a nice little chamfer on it so there were no sharp edges. I like to do this after knurling because sometimes the knurl rolls that edge over. And with that, I could put those back onto the tools, and it works just as it should, and it's just a nice handle. I'm pretty happy with how my little project today went. I may paint those black in the future, but for right now I'm going to leave them raw and see how I feel about that as time goes on. Either way, I'm going to draw my card for next week. Right now. Let's see what we got. Boom! 7 of hearts. We have a camera box. So next week I'm going to be making a box for my camera. So come on back for that. And as always, thank you for watching.